Running an EV charging station is complex and expensive, and the returns are small. So it's no wonder that the only way any of these things get built is by using taxpayer funds that could be better spent on something else. Anything else for that matter. They cost a great deal more and are inherently more complex than regular fuel pumps, meaning that the failure rate is high. Not what you want to be bothered with when your car is out of charge and you have a young family in the back seats. So while the number of EV charging stations is, on the face of it, increasing, behind the scenes there is a different picture playing out, as operators realise that they are a commercial and logistical black hole and simply not worth the investment. Welcome back to MGUY, British engineer and lawyer, now Sydney-based YouTuber. If you'd like to support this channel and display your anti-EV credentials to your Tesla-owning neighbours at the same time, why not buy some awesome MGUY merchandise, like this mug, this baseball cap, or this t-shirt. Each high-quality item sports the MGUY No EVs sign, and they're all made to order, perfect for irritating the hell out of your local EV zealots. Visit store.mguy.tv or click the link in the description to check out the full range of products. And of course, you can always just buy me a coffee. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. A trio of charging stories today: a disaster in Queensland where councils are abandoning EV charging and converting the locations back to regular parking spaces, yay, a much vaunted electric highway in Western Australia that is closing down. But firstly, a symptom of the lack of profits that can be made from public charging, namely price hikes, which are now putting public EV charging costs above the price of regular fuel, as the Irish Independent reports. ESB hikes prices on EV charging by up to 15%, with some drivers paying €7 more per charge. The price rises on Ireland's biggest public charging network for electric cars means that the cost of fully charging some EVs will now rise above €60, making it more expensive than petrol or diesel for a similar driving range. The cost of publicly charging an electric car is being increased by up to 15% by Ireland's biggest provider. ESB Cars, which has the most public charging points in the country, is adding 7 cents per kilowatt hour across all of its tariffs, raising the cost of charging an electric car by up to €7. The move comes after electric car sales for the first 6 months rose 27% in Ireland compared to the same period in 2024. However, sales still lag 2023's figures, as the majority of Irish car buyers wonder about range and public charging availability. The new price rise means that the cost of publicly charging the best-selling Volkswagen ID.4 will rise to more than €50 on large battery models that have realistic ranges of between 400 kilometers and 530 kilometers in your dreams, depending on what season it is, at what speed the car travels, and whether car heaters are used. Smaller battery models with much smaller ranges will now cost up to €25 per charge at a public network charger. It makes charging an electric car from the public network more expensive than using petrol or diesel in many circumstances. And then, of course, you have the usual weasel words from the operator. The price increase is being implemented in response to sustained increases in operational costs and electricity network charges absorbed by ESB e-cars in recent months, the ESB said of its price increase. The new pricing supports continued investment in our EV charger network and the continued rollout of high-power chargers, ensuring a robust and future-ready EV charging infrastructure. So translating that, in other words, we ain't making enough coin. So we have to jack up prices. And as the article correctly states, people living in apartment blocks and in terraced homes rely heavily on public charging. So unless you have the luxury of off-street parking where you can charge overnight, you're not going to save any money on fueling up by buying an electric car, which was the big selling point of the things in the first place. So that's gone. In Western Australia, the RAC has pulled out of an electrification project for unspecified reasons, but I think we can guess, can't we? WA's RAC electric highway charging project ends despite rise in EVs. When West Australian car insurer RAC first launched its electric highway, installing electric vehicle chargers in WA's southwest, it was the first network of its kind in Australia and opened regional travel to EV owners for the first time. Not that there were many of them. RAC General Manager of External Relations, Will Goldsby, said there were about 80 electric cars in the state in 2015 when the highway first opened. In surveys the RAC conducted 10 years ago, people were interested in EVs, but the number one concern was range anxiety, the fear that the vehicles would be unusable outside of Perth because there was nowhere to charge them. The original intent of the electric highways was really to open Western Australia up and enable people from Perth to travel through the southwest and allow our regional members with electric vehicles to travel to Perth, Mr Goldsby told Gary Adshed on ABC Radio Perth. In 10 years, the number of fully electric vehicles in WA has grown to about 27,000, and there are about 150 charging stations across the state. The state government has spent more than $43 million on subsidies to help people buy electric vehicles and committed $21 million to extending the charging network. So I don't get this. Despite the number of EVs increasing substantially, there was still not enough of a business case to keep going. I think that tells you all you need to know about the economics of public charging. And eventually the cost and maintenance was too much to sustain. The RAC purchased and installed electric highway charging stations, but they were owned and managed by local governments. Councils weren't prepared for what it took to look after this sort of equipment, Dr. Jones said. You have to learn new skills, get familiar with new technology. You don't make much money from it. Indeed you don't. And from the other side of the country in Queensland comes this extraordinary tale of woe, with even the trees hating EV charging stations. The tritium legacy. Councils give up on broken EV chargers and one gets wiped out by a tree. The Gold Coast City Council, host to one of the highest uptakes of electric vehicles outside of the national capital, has ripped out the bulk of its EV charging stations and is giving up on trying to keep the tritium-made equipment online. Tritium, the Brisbane-based company that dominated the initial rollout of EV fast chargers in Australia and took a major chunk of the global market, collapsed 2 years ago before being bought out by an Indian company. Tritium may have been a pace setter, but its first-generation equipment proved to be unreliable, and many charging hosts complained of the difficulty in securing spare parts and repairs. The Gold Coast is not the only one to scrap its tritium fleet, although it likely had one of the biggest EV charging fleets in any council. Motoring clubs are also frustrated. Last year, the RACV replaced 22 of its tritium chargers, and NRMA has done the same in New South Wales. And in the Red Centre, where a tritium charger failed in an off-grid setup. In Queensland, a number of tritium chargers along the state's superhighway have already been or about to be replaced. In Western Australia, the RAC has simply walked away from supporting the network it helped create over the past decade, and some of the council hosts have already decided to follow the example of the Gold Coast and others and dismantle their chargers. Mandurah is to rip out its unreliable tritium charger, and it will be decommissioned on Friday, July 25th, today in fact. Another tritium charger at Augusta is not working. At Bridgetown, the tritium charger has also been ripped out by the local council, and it is rumoured it will be replaced by a 350 kilowatt charger, complete with solar and batteries. And just to add to the frustration of local EV drivers, this week a tree fell on top of the tritium charger at Ballingup, just as one EV user had predicted it would be in demand because of the Bridgetown closure. Extraordinary. And this just highlights one of the other issues with EV charging, namely they're stuck out in the middle of bleak, windswept car parks, where they are subject to the full force of the elements. So it's not surprising that they get flooded or vandalised or have trees fall on them. I've always said that charging is the Achilles heel of the proposed transition to EVs, and these stories don't do much to dispel that view. Thanks very much for watching, really hope you enjoyed it. If you've got any tips or stories, go there. If you'd like to watch another video, go there. If you'd like to buy me a coffee, go there. And please subscribe to the channel.